Hi, it's Josh, your Goth fragrance bestie. I believe perfume is a language that speaks to us, not in words and colors, but in emotions and memories. In Goth Fragrance Dialogues, we will be listening to people who channel and craft that language for us. In this episode of Goth Fragrance Dialogues, I've traveled to LA to interview Syd Botanica.
I've technically been doing perfume for about 6 years, but I have been creating formulas for 15 years. I got my start as a graphic designer. I got into the field, immediately knew I didn't want to do that. And I found perfume. I fell in love with it. And I had this desire to learn more about the plants and the perfumes. For some reason, it didn't dawn on me that I could be a perfumer. And I had just gone to this expensive art school. So I was like, I'm going to make this work on my budget. So I went to an herb school. And I also wasn't sure what I was going to do with that education. So I was really curious about the relationship between plants and humans and their folklore and the kind of effects that they have on the body. And I thought that I was going to become an herbalist. I eventually decided I didn't want to do that either. And as I was saying earlier, I met my partner. We moved around a lot. So there's some gaps in there too. I lived in Poland for a couple of years. And then when we came back to the United States, we landed in Colorado. And that's where I met my mentor, Dawn. And when I first met her, I asked her to teach me to do perfume, and she said no. But then we talked a little bit, and we hit it off. And I think she kind of realized, oh, you're not really a beginner. You kind of have some background, applicable skills that, we can kind of bring together here. And that's what she did for me. She merged these worlds that I thought were really parallel into this one perfect thing. So I've been doing this full time for a couple of years. The brand launched in 2022, and it's been so great so far. It's been so much fun.
What is your first memory associated with scent?
I love that question so much, because there's so many to choose from. I had the privilege of knowing my great-grandparents, and I remember going to their house. They're Italian, and there's just this very distinctive smell of their house, of just pasta sauce baked into the wallpaper. Just a really deep gravy smell. I have a lot of smell memories associated with my grandmother. She was an amazing cook. We used to bake together. We'd make cookies together. We'd make these Italian cookies called pizzelles. I'm actually working on a chord to recreate that scent. We would smell flowers together, and I, as a little kid, was always really interested in scent. I would be oh, it smells good. She would loved it. I'd said that. She would always be smells good. I'd just a little bit. I love the smell of summer, of climbing trees and bark and soil and working up grass in my hands, getting really dirty, and chlorinated swimming pools and wet dog and all those kinds of things.
So what inspired you to start Syd Botanica and really delve into the perfumery side of it?
Yeah, so Syd Botanica is actually 10 years old as a concept, as a company. I thought I was going to sell herbalist wares. But what I ended up doing was I started incense making. I was totally uninterested in making herbalist stuff. I really just wanted to work with scent. And that kept coming up over and over again. Even when I was in school, I was really interested in the kind of mind-body connection in scent and what happens there, and the kind of effects that scent has on our emotions. So that just felt really natural for me. Started collecting all this stuff. And I started incense making, and I started formulating them like perfumes. I was oh, what happens if I have a top, middle, and base? What happens if I work with structure here? But instead of alcohol, the medium is fire. And I learned so much about scent formulation by starting out as an incense maker. So we did that. I did that for a couple years. It was fairly successful. But I had to stop because I moved to Poland, and it was too hard to continue the business abroad for kinds of reasons. I couldn't access the same materials in the same way. There's more regulations, there's taxes and stuff. So I just kind of put it aside. And then when I got back to the United States, I was like, I have no idea what I'm going to do. I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life till I was like in my mid-30s. Now I'm 40. So when I got back, I just started like messaging people, like all kinds of different people, like who were interested in like similar things. And Don replied, and we met. And then, yeah, here we are.
How do you feel like your background in design influences your fragrance creation?
Oh my gosh, it's like, in some ways, it's so integrated that I don't even think about it. Like, I have to stop and think about it sometimes. But, so obviously, I do all my own design, and there is like a kind of holistic relationship between the scent work and the visual work, because I'm just doing all of it. And I'm trying to make it all like reflect each other and tie in together. And that's something that design teaches you how to do, is how to build a cohesive system that can, you know, all these little pieces that are different can relate to each other. And I do it in my work quite a lot. People have said when they smell the work, they can tell that it's like made by the same hand. It fits like it's all in the same world. I also use a lot of the same visual principles in design in my perfumery work. So that means like paying attention to the negative space, what's in the foreground, what's in the background, opacity, you know, strength, like what, you know, like things like that. I like to play around with like the strength and the like pull of things.
Who are some of the biggest influences in the world of perfumery to you, and why?
Yeah, one of the first perfume I ever bought was in a store in Paris in like 2005. It was Au Jardin sur le Nil. I'm going to absolutely butcher that. I'm so sorry. It's Perfumes by Jean-Claude Alina. And I didn't know he was the perfumer at the time. Actually, like, really didn't know anything about him. But there's something about that perfume just like really stood out to me as being really special, and fell in love with it. And there's something about its DNA that I think is still present in my work. I think like Suspended Water Lily especially has some of that DNA in it. There's something about the way he just like captures this like openness in his work that I really love. I would say also Christopher Berzi has had like a huge influence on me when I was first getting into perfume in my early 20s. He just really stood out. He was making work that was so unlike everything else that was popular at the time. His work is like really kind of thoughtful and introverted and poetic in a way that like you just didn't see that as often back then. And he really bridged that kind of like perfumery is an art form, you know, for sure, for him. Mm-hmm. You know, he really bridged that for all. And his work just felt so personal. And I don't know, he was like the first perfumer that I met. I didn't meet him, that I'd heard of, that I felt like I could relate to as a person. Like, he was like a taxi driver in New York. He was like kind of punk rock. You know, he wasn't like as stuffy as some of the other, these other like, you know, Euro white dudes. You know, he just seemed cool. Dawn had a massive influence on me too. She is genius. She's for real a genius. It was like such a privilege and so cool to be able to see her in action. You know, we would be sketching together with the same palette. You know, I'd come to her with an idea, and that's how she taught me. She's like, okay, here's the palette you might want for this perfume idea. And it's just like, the stuff that she would pull out of the materials would be incredible. Just, I don't know. She's amazing. She's just like so talented. Like, she understands her materials so well.
Can you describe what your creative process is when you start developing a fragrance, even from like the infancy?
It often starts with the name, actually. Or it starts with an idea that I'm kind of obsessing over. That, well, in the beginning, I was like, after the pandemic, so I was like really focused on ideas that felt like really healing and soothing to me. During the pandemic, I started writing poetry, because not something I had to practice in doing before. And that link between like poetry and perfume had like already been there for me for a long time, but it really solidified it by actually writing. So it usually starts with the name, and the name is the key. And the key unlocks this like world. And I'm a meditator, So I just like imagine I'm in that world and I'm bringing back artifacts from it that I can share with everybody. And the artifacts are the perfume. So that's one approach that I have. But lately I've been making more chords for one. That's changed my practice a little bit. It's made me a better perfumer. I wasn't in the practice of doing that as much, but I started making accords when I started teaching. And sometimes things kind of come together in unexpected ways. Like I have this like strawberry accord that I'm not sure what I'm going to do with yet, you know? And sometimes, you know, somebody will come to me with a commission and I have to reverse engineer it, right? I'm like, okay, how am I going to make this happen? Like the meteorite perfume, for example. I can study the scent of actual meteorites that my friend sent me in the mail and reverse engineered that scent with metallic-y, rosy smells.
What role does nature and the environment play in fragrance development for you?
It's very spiritual for me, honestly. I mean, like, nature is a great way to talk about spirituality without getting in the weeds or getting dogmatic. You know, it's universal. We can all stand in front of a valley or the ocean or the night sky and like have that feeling of like, oh, there's something that's much bigger than me, you know? And that is a spiritual feeling. So it's by referencing nature, it's one of the ways we can like talk about universal themes, you know, without alienating people.
And how did you choose the ingredients for your perfume?
That's a hard question to answer because it's so case by case. So sometimes I'll start with an idea, like a grouping that sounds interesting to me, right? I know you were talking earlier, like my notes app is absolutely full of these little accord ideas or perfume ideas. So it usually starts with something like that. And then on top of that, I'll work really intuitively. I'll be like, I'll listen to the perfume and I'll let it tell me what it wants.
How does the perfume speak to you? Are you someone who sees things very visually when you're working through them?
Sometimes it's like, I'll look at the bottles and like one of them will have like a little halo around it. It feels silly to say that out loud. Or it's like, or I know there's like a quality that's missing and I'll be like, okay, what can fill that quality in this case? And I'll, you know, try things and I'll fail a lot. There's a lot of that too, you know? A kind of a combination of things.
When you set out, did you say, you know, these are going to be my first, like, set of fragrances? Or was it, those were the ones that came forward the quickest? And, like, was it a composition where you wanted to create a collection? Or was it these were the ones that were speaking out and wanted to be ready?
Yeah, those first three those came through when I was like, okay, I'm going to launch 3 perfumes to start. Butterfly, Tamer, Honey Body, and Wavy Tulip were the first 3 that came through. Wavy Tulip is my first perfume. And actually looking back on it now, I've grown so much since that time. Like there are things that like I would technically want to reformulate a little bit maybe in the future, but yeah, it felt like that's what wanted to come through first. And then after that, almost immediately after that, I was studying alchemy. So I have a background in alchemy. I've been studying that since like my mid-20s when I was in herb school. Totally changed my life. I thought I was just going to learn lab techniques. I thought I was just going to learn distillation. And ended up changing my relationship to nature, really. It just turned everything into poetry for me. So I took this alchemy class because my friend Eliza was teaching it, and I really wanted to meet them and wanted to be inspired by the class. So I started working on this alchemy series. There will be 7 in total. The first 3 of this series are War, Protean, Desire, Suspended Water Lily, and Ghost Flowers. And those were the next 3 that came after that. And they're actually like some of my most popular perfumes.
I was going to say, Protean Desire and Honey Body are 2 of the ones that resonated with me personally the most.
Yeah.
When you talk about using nature as a form to tap into spirituality,
yeah.
I think those 2 really show that
yeah.
for me.
Those 2 are about embodiment. joyful embodiment. And that's something I've struggled with a lot of my life. Like, I was like not into being in a body for some reason. I've just always like struggled with it. So yeah, like that's definitely an avenue I'm trying to tap into a lot more now. When I first started, I was like, oh, these perfumes aren't for me. They're for somebody else. I don't even wear all my own work. But from now on, I don't want to release anything that like I feel like I wouldn't reach for a lot.
Super cool. Yeah, honey body especially, there's something almost ritualistic in the quality of it.
Yeah.
That it is something where you could easily wear it and just say, I feel good.
Yeah.
But also, if you kind of meditate on the way the fragrance makes you feel, it is one of the ones that has really resonated with me in that quality where you're like, it would not surprise me if someone were to say this was something that was made hundreds of years ago or now or 50 years from now. It just has this very timeless quality to it that I think is spectacular.
That makes me so happy to hear that. And that is, I would say that's like a big theme in my work, is like referring to something that's ancient and referring to something that could be futuristic and where you don't know where you are on that timeline. You know, it's like something I like to play with a lot. Also, that perfume is like, it's dedicated to the goddess Saibo.
Mm-hmm.
It is literally things I would put on her altar.
I think that it and Pretty and Desire both speak a lot to your experience with incense as well.
Yep.
Because incense is so easy to be either heavy-handed with or it can come off stale. And those come off so rich and just really, really lovely. What is the philosophy behind Syd Botanica?
The kind of idea behind Syd Botanica is like, I'm kind of creating these imaginary worlds and they're really rich. And I want to like create as much lore around these perfumes as much as I can. I want you to step into that world, but I don't want to tell you how to feel. I want to just like have it be this open container that you can step into, and you can feel any kind of way about it you want to. And I would say like, it really is a blending of my background as a healing with herbs and as a designer. It's like really both of those things.
What is the world of Butterfly Tamer?
It's kind of like a first player video game where you're like this hairy satyr, but you're an ambassador. You're also very dapper, and you're like walking into this forest, and this like butterfly ambassador comes up to you and like lands on your palm and greets you and says, I present to you the forest or the meadow. It's very floral too. Yeah, it's a perfume about gentleness, and I find like the perfumes that people are drawn to actually says a lot about like something that they might need in their life. So the people who tend to like Butterfly Tamer like are drawn to meaning they need gentleness in their life. They're drawn to gentleness.
What do you think people are drawn to for like Pretty and Desire?
Embodiment, and sometimes it's protection. Sometimes they want to be like, I'm gonna be more in their masculine. That's the way I feel when I wear it. I feel like I'm dropping in my masculine a little bit, which I enjoy. Or they just want to like, feel like sexy. Sometimes it's not that deep too.
How do you feel that the philosophy behind Syd Botanica is reflected in the perfumes?
I don't know, just in the doing of it, I guess.
I think that's an accurate in the doing of it is a perfectly good spot.
Like, I really try to show up authentically. I try to honor what I've created here, like, as much as I can. I hate marketing. I don't want to do it. I'd rather just people like experience the things and like let them be inspired by it. And that's actually like my favorite part is like the creativity that can come out when people like try perfumes, like the whole fragrance community, right? It's like, this is so amazing that people can like try perfume and it will like spur writing for them. It will spur like ideas for like visual art. Like I just love that. It's so cool.
Okay, cool. So you have a design background, but you hate marketing?
Yes, I hate marketing. I mean, I can do it. I just don't always want to.
Any commentary on it?
No.
Okay. Love that. How do you balance the art of perfumery with the science behind creating fragrances?
I don't have a chemistry background. I know a little bit about chemistry from being an herbalist, and it's really handy when you want to make like photorealistic accords and things like that. But like truthfully, there's so much available now. There's so many resources available for people who are just getting into this, like more than ever. I don't think you need to have a chemistry background to make perfume. You need to know lab safety, of course, and you need to check your MSDS sheets, and you need to like work within the safety guidelines, right? You want to make sure you're not hurting yourself or other people. But like, I think you can kind of learn about the chemistry as you go. I don't think that like it should stop you from starting to make stuff. And you know, and then like things that come up all the time, like, you know, I was like thinking about making this grape soda accord. And I learned that these two ingredients that I was going to put in that accord have a adverse reaction. They have like a bad chemical reaction. And it was like a methylanthranilate, which is like this grapey kind of material. And this aldehyde C12. Like apparently they will pull things out of solution and cause flocking. So like, you know, a lot of it for me has been learning as I go, honestly. And it's one of the things that I love about perfumery. It really encourages like lifelong learning.
I think that leads really well into the next question, which is, what do you hope people feel or experience when they wear your fragrances?
I hope they feel inspired. I hope they feel good in their body. I hope they come back to themselves. I hope like some memory will come up for them that they hadn't thought about in a long time. I love it when that happens. I love when people share that stuff with me, like, oh, look, like they smell like butterfly Tamer, and they're like, oh, this smells like summer camp when I was a kid. You know, like there's all kinds of things that like I could never anticipate that would come out, you know, that would come from this sense. Like someone told me, honey buddy, they come from the town where like Szechuan peppers are harvested, and they said this smells like home, and I was like, wow, that's really touching. So, you know, that's why I do this. And like that's the stuff I love.
Creating fragrances on your own versus teaching others to make fragrances, is that a different emotional process for you?
It's a little different because when I'm teaching, I'm trying to make it as easy for them as possible, right? Because I'm just going to have this one day with them, and I want them to walk away with something they really like. So I hide a lot of the math from them, right? I'm like hiding some of the things that might be difficult. I've made these accords that are like, I've made this palette that I think is going to like go together really well. I'm going to make it really hard for you to fuck it up. And for the most part, that's worked. And I'm really attuned to like, okay, what are you trying to accomplish here? What do you want it to do? I make it about them. And so far it's worked really well. Like everybody's walked away with like something that really resonates with like who they are, which has been so cool to see that. And on top of that, there have been like a lot of amazing ideas that like I would have never thought of. Like the stuff people come up with is just like so amazing. So I love teaching. It's really fun. And it's actually made me a better perfumer.
How so?
Well, first of all, having to explain to someone how to do something, it will solidify a lot of that stuff for you. And again, it's like put me in the practice of like, how do I design accords for class? How do I make a palette that all goes together? Like anticipating all the things that could go wrong. And then maybe like just like working in materials for the class too. I don't know. It's just, and then problem solving for people on the fly also to make me better.
So what are some of the challenges you faced in the perfume industry, and how have you overcome them?
Well, everything's so expensive. That's always a barrier to entry. I invested in my bottles. Like I really wanted them to look like potion bottles. And then, you know, they have the kind of caps you have to like squeeze on and then like pop on collar. Yeah, my bottles some of them were leaking. So that sucked. I mean, you hear back from clients like, oh yeah, my bottle's leaking. And that's so embarrassing that happens. I had since hopefully mostly fix the problem. But there's like all kinds of little technical things that can go wrong. There's all kinds of little customer service things that happen. I've been having some health problems. So like my stamina isn't super great. Like I have days when I'm really, really tired and I'm struggling to do the bare minimum. That's one of the days. The hustle part's really hard for me.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I guess, do you feel the pressure the most when it's sales related or like customer success?
Oh, customer success, definitely. I don't care about sales as much. I should, but I will care about that more. Yeah, I want my customers to have the best experience possible.
So how has your journey in perfumery evolved from your very early days kind of studying alchemy to now teaching perfume?
So much. You know, like, what's really funny, I realized that I had some really silly biases about working with certain materials that were ridiculous. So like my earliest perfumes, I like totally avoided like using popular molecules, right? I was like, I'm not going to use isoacetic or amproxen or like any of these like extender molecules. I'm not going to mess with any of that stuff. And then like, you know, the project comes along to do Angel Face. And it's about making this like girly pop fragrance, you know? It's like supposed to be a pop song. It's supposed to embody like my friend Piper's kind of like aesthetic. And she's like very dumb, you know? So I was like, okay, let's see what happens if I throw in like every cliche Victoria's Secret kind of ingredient I can in there. And it ended up being so good. And I was like, okay, well, I've been thinking about this like in this way that's actually like really limiting. It's not that the materials are bad. It's not that the materials are overused. You can use them in a way that nobody else is using them. You can use them in a different dilution. You can pair them in a really weird way. Like, there's actually so much room for innovation there.
Very cool. It's funny because Angel Face was one of the ones that I use music to regulate my emotions a lot.
Yeah.
And it was one of the ones where I was like, this perfume makes me think of a particular band.
Yeah.
Particularly Coco Rosie for that one.
That's cool.
Yeah, because they use like children's toys that are circuit bent in the music and stuff. So it had this very bubbly, almost childlike quality,
definitely.
kind of tinted in its own kind of tongue-in-cheek, almost undermined way that I thought was very, very interesting, very playful. I like that one. What was a turning point for you in your kind of journey, or something that sticks out as like, this was when I knew I was doing something right, or this like really changed my perspective?
I worked on this perfume with Dawn when I was studying with her, called Lily of the Uncanny Valley. I'm going to bring it back next year, actually. I had like a little grouping of perfumes that I like kind of soft launched and then discontinued because I felt like I could do better. But that was kind of like the first time I made a perfume where I really leaned into like the uncomfortability and weirdness of synthetics. So like when I met Dawn, I thought I was going to be a natural perfumer. And she talked me out of it. And she was correct, because like I was coming at her with like all these weird concepts and she's like, you're never going to just achieve that with naturals alone. You know, we're going to have to like open it up and explore other options here. Are you okay with that? And I was like, you know what? Yeah, fine. That's fine. So I had a bias about that because natural was in my comfort zone, right? So that was one of the first times I like pushed myself out of my comfort zone to make something that's like intentionally a little uncomfortable, like play with that tension of like uncomfortability, but wearability also, you know.
How do you see the future of the fragrance industry evolving, especially with the growing emphasis on sustainability and natural ingredients?
That is a really good and huge question, and we could spend a really long time talking about that.
Of the fragrance industry evolving, especially with the growing emphasis on
of course, right? Natural is not necessarily better.
Of the fragrance industry evolving, especially with the growing emphasis on
And so for context, I'm not an expert in sustainability, but during the pandemic, myself and 3 other perfumers created something called the Coalition of Sustainable Perfumery.
and we created a website with resources on it for perfumers to, kind of do some like self-inquiry about their own perfume organs and their own practice to see how they fare sustainability-wise. The other people involved with that were Mauricio Garcia of Herb Craft Perfumery, Heather D'Angelo of Carta Fragrances, and Molly Brennan of House of Sacred Scents. So that's just a little, if you guys want to look at that, you can. So that being said, yeah, we had the same question for ourselves, like, are our practices sustainable even? And my thinking about it has changed a lot. Since that time, like, I felt a lot more personal responsibility to, like, have a sustainable brand back then. And now, as you know, we all, like, have seen that, like, our impact is so much smaller than, like, the big guys, right? So much smaller than the big houses. So it's, like, not necessarily up to us to do everything perfectly, but it is our responsibility to hold the people in power accountable, right? And there could be a lot more transparency when it comes to the supply chains. Like, this stuff that came out about child labor in Egypt, the jasmine farming. I wasn't surprised to hear that at all. It's very common practice, actually, because a lot of cultures have different feelings about child labor, right? But that information should have been made public. So, like, perfumers can, like, make their own decisions about that. So there needs to be a lot more transparency. I know climate change is, of course, a factor of the supply chain. It's already been happening. I've seen that change so much for the last 10 years, especially working with incense materials. There are instances where it's actually better to use the synthetic version than the original, or the natural version. Or there's always an alternative to the natural version that's also natural. It could be, like, more sustainably grown or sourced, right? In particular, we're talking about things that are slow growing, like sandalwood, or things that are wild crafted, like frankincense, right? And frankincense cartare in particular. Both of those are threatened right now. There's, like, sandalwood poaching that happens sometimes. I mean, if you as an individual perfumer wanted to work with those materials, again, like, it wouldn't be the end of the world because your impact is small. But, like, for a larger company to engage with that stuff it's not good. So, yeah, lots of greenwashing going on in that world. Lots of chemical phobia going on. I understand how people get there as someone who used to work in alternative healthcare, right? Like, I understand why people are afraid of chemicals. I understand that, like, people get, like, put through the ringer with the healthcare system. They have chemical sensitivities. They have illnesses that, like, that nobody has an answer for. So a lot of it's, emotionality based, and it's disregarding facts a lot of the time. But I have sympathy for it. I don't think it's right. I don't condone it. I see how people get there. I think what we're going to see in the future, to answer your question more directly, is a lot of innovation in the synthetics realm, actually. So some aroma chemicals are derived from petrochemicals, right? Obviously not sustainable. But I think what we're going to see is a lot of innovation in the way that aroma chemicals are made. Like, petrochemicals are used because they're, like, this soup of molecules, right? Like, surely we have alternatives to that. And there are people making aroma and flavor chemicals from algae. And, there's an aldehyde called biononal that's available on the Perfumer's Apprentice website that's made from vegetable oil. So I think there's a lot of room for innovation there. And I think that's where the industry has to head.
So you recently released Meteorite with the Golden Dome School. Do you care to share anything else that you might be working on?
Yeah, I have another release coming out really soon called Liminal Creatures. It's a animal like chypre. The chypre part's really sheer though, and it's, like, kind of woody. It has one floral in it called deer's tongue, which is supposed to smell like the inside of a deer's mouth, which I thought was really cute. So it's got this, like, animal chypre theme to it. I'm really proud of it. It felt like a breakthrough. Honestly, it felt like a breakthrough perfume for me. So that'll be coming out soon, maybe before this podcast is up or interview is up. And then I have 3 more perfumes that I don't think they're done yet, but they're, like, mostly done. They're the next three in the Alchemy series. I was just in an art show where I showed them in the gallery, and I'll be working on those, and hopefully we'll have them done by the fall.
What's the world of the animalic chiffra, of liminal creatures?
It's on an astral plane. It's kind of about limerence, actually. It's about moving through it. So it's these two lovers turn into animals, and they're meeting on the astral plane, but they can't be human there. They're transforming to creatures. And the shipwreck part's just this atmosphere. It's the background, and in the foreground it's the animals and these woods. Yeah.
That sounds amazing. And that's a wrap for today's episode of Goth Fragrance Dialogues. I hope you enjoyed this deep dive into the world of fragrance and the incredible stories behind the scents that we explore. As always, if you want to learn more, be sure to check out the links in the description for more details and ways to connect with our guests. And don't forget to support their work. It's all about celebrating creativity and passion. If you're loving this content, regardless of what platform, please subscribe, that way you never miss out on a new episode. We've got more exciting stories, insights, and interviews coming your way. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Josh, your Goth Fragrance Bestie. Keep exploring the world of scent, stay inspired, and we'll catch you next episode.